But at the same time, the First World War kicks off. Now, here in the States, we don't get involved in the First World War. We don't actively get involved in the First World War until 1917.
That's like
I don't think any
4 years
of our
in.
troops landed 2 years in. It started in 1914. 2-3 years in, we get involved. And this will be important to the state of mind of fathers. The way that we trained soldiers was way different in the 19th century than it was in the 20th. Because when we decided, okay, we're going to go into this war, the powers that be looked at our manpower in our army and said, we don't have anywhere near enough troops to be able to send over, at least not enough that are trained well, to where we think we can send them over to help. Because there's also a couple of places where the Indians are a little bit rowdy. We need them there. There's a couple of places, just, we need to be able to defend our own borders.
Mm-hmm.
In case, the Mexicans or the Spanish get a little rowdy. We just beat them in 1898. So we need to be sure that we can protect ourselves too. So what they do is they enlist Blackjack Pershing and one other guy whose name I forget to come up with a method of training soldiers for battle as quickly as possible. This is kind of the first time when mass production mindset gets put into warfare.
Okay.
Basically come up with a method of training that will get as many men fit to the minimum level of combat as possible. And our army's numbers just explode at this time. Not to the degree that they did in the Second World War, but they still just explode. And we send over a whole bunch, and then the Allies win, which really means that the British and the French win, because we just kind of went over and kicked Germany while they were down and pretended that we won the war all by ourselves.
Was
again,
it a stalemate before
then?
then? Because of all the trench warfare and such?
It was partially a stalemate. Just, again, because of the way that warfare was done. And as a whole, too, the First World War was the first time that industry was applied to warfare. So when it started with cavalry charges and firing lines and, all of the old ways. It was 4 years long, 1914 to 1918. By the time that war ended, we had tanks, machine guns, and gas. The gas came first. But by the time that war ended, we had tanks and machine guns. So warfare changes drastically. I think the last organized cavalry charge in recorded history was in either 1916 or 1917. It was a British unit. And the United States gets involved in the latter half of the war when they've started going into the industrialized version of warfare, where we have machine guns and we have tanks and we have machines to kill people for us. We have machines that do our killing, and it basically becomes about killing as many enemy troops as we can in the least amount of time. So bombs get bigger, tanks become a thing, machine guns become a thing, because you can spray on a line with a machine gun and kill 75 men.
Mm-hmm.
In a single, basically, volley of fire. So this is kind of the first time that men are going to war and not really able to prepare themselves before the battle. Because in every war before this that we had fought, we kind of know when the battle is starting, so you can kind of psych yourself up for it and prepare yourself for it and work your way into it. At this time, you could be sitting in the trenches and a mortar lands between your feet. Or, I don't know, you could be sitting in the trenches and a bomb goes off. You could peek your head above the trenches or there's a lull in the fire, so you go over the top and all of a sudden a machine gun opens up and you and your entire platoon are basically dead.
Yeah, and the only time it's a surprise is if you're in week 1 of the war. Yeah. After that point, you just know it's coming eventually.
You know it's coming eventually, but it's still not something that people have been wired for.
Well, exactly.
It's not a kind of warfare that man has been designed for. Like the kind of warfare that man was designed for was the kind where you can look your opponent in the eye as you killed him.
Yeah, and this by comparison is a slaughterhouse.
Yeah. And then when you take into account the gases that were used, you could be sitting in your trench minding your own business. It's a lull in the fighting. And all of a sudden the other side lobs a canister of gas into your trench. And you get to sit there and choke to death while you're watching your compatriots have the flesh torn from their bones.
Ugh.
Which actually happened to the Russians. The Germans actually had wound up with this myth that Russians were all but unkillable, because I forget what gas it was, but they had launched a gas attack against a Russian bunker, and when they went in, the Russians' flesh was basically melting off of their bones, but they were still alive and fighting back. So technically, the Germans lost that battle until all of the Russians were dead from the gas. It was basically like the first account of basically finding and fighting zombies,
which is more of the warrior spirit that we want. The type of thing that this war doesn't foster.
Yes. Like that's we need to fight like Russians. Yes. So basically, we're going into war thinking that it's going to be like the Spanish-American War, that it's going to be like our Civil War, that it's going to be like 1898, or that it's going to be like the Mexican-American War. And there are enough people alive, and some of them who are in the military, that remember those wars and maybe served in them. But at this point, they're going in, and then what's that whistling sound? Where did this half of my men go? War and death happen so much faster and so much more brutally than they ever have before. So this is kind of where we first seeing what is now called PTSD. At that point, it was just called shell shock, because there's documented reports of a shell hitting and exploding, and then a man who is physically perfectly fine, but he's laying there and he's frozen, and he can't move, he can't think, he can barely even see.
Mm-hmm.
And he can't be reasoned with. He is just frozen in place.
Yeah, because human beings are designed more. I mean, it's not like you bring two cavalry forces together and they charge and it turns into a mosh pit. It's not like that's pretty and fun and humane and anything like that. But we're designed for that a lot more than being, to go back to the earlier analogy, just slaughtered.
Yeah.
Just you're in a pen. It's
then
called
seeing
a trench.
15 men die in about 5 seconds.
Yep.
That had never happened before, except in cases where there were, explosions and maybe at sea and, in some specific cases. Now at one point, it's just expected. And now warfare becomes about how many men can we just throw at the enemy until they finally give in? How many bodies can we sacrifice? It's, our soldiers are mass produced. They're a dime a dozen, and you cannot mass produce human life.
So that has a immense impact on men and society and the family, everything downstream of that. Yeah.
Because you cannot come from that, back from that, not broken in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you were a non-combatant, if you drove like a medical truck or something, if you were a medic, mm-hmm. or a doctor or a nurse, because a lot of women went overseas as nurses as well, the shit that you're seeing is going to stay with you.
Absolutely.
And that is going to break you. Many people, it is going to break.
Mm-hmm.
So they come home in 1918. We've won the war. Yay, everything is good. Until finally the dopamine wears off and, oh shit, I'm still missing a leg. Oh shit, my buddy is still permanently crippled because of the gas. Or, oh, I saw 15 men die right in front of my eyes, and we were talking and laughing the night before. And so a lot of the same issues that the 50s had with how fathers were that I outlined in the last episode, we have now. We have in the like 1919 and into the 1920s in the home.
Mm-hmm.
With women, it's not, they're not quite in the same situation. But that's kind of where it starts, is that the minds of fathers start being broken.